Well, thank you, and good morning. Just briefly, I founded Princeton Review way back in the day and ran it for 20-odd years. Took it public, hated being public for a lot of the reasons you guys exist, dealing with Sarbanes-Oxley and various compliance issues. And left to create a company now called 2U, and actually that company's done really well. It too, the board wanted to take it public, and I thought it was a good time to exit. And so my new company, Noodle, which I'll explain down the road, is a studio. There are actually 3 Noodle companies that we're launching that are in various phases and building teams, all of which are around the education marketplace in a variety of ways. So when you think of great brands like Coca-Cola, Vicks, I mean, these are 100-year-old brands plus, they're global. Education is not just a $1.3 trillion market in the US, $5 trillion and growing very quickly globally. It is a place of some very serious brands, and one of the trend lines in higher ed, just to keep in the back of your mind, is that there's this explosion, actually across all education. This is education, but this is ed tech. The number of options available in that industry, whether you're a parent or kid, and there are preschools and virtual schools and after-school programs and all sorts of new tech coming every day at you. If you're a university, that's the universe of different providers, whether it's on the marketing side or the learning side or advancement or anything else. If you're a K-12 school, the number of new curricula that you're being hit with is truly breathtaking in scope. There are $6 billion invested in ed tech in the past 5 years, and that number is accelerating. It was $2 billion last year alone. The notion of the Noodle Companies is that somebody's got to make sense of that for buyers, and this is all part of kind of what you do and part of where I think we can add value. When people think of compliance, and actually when I thought of compliance back as a public company CEO, I thought of doing things in a bureaucratic way to serve a bunch of bureaucratic needs, and it was a cost center and an overhead of the worst sort. And I've come to realize that really it's about excellence. That everybody wants to be excellent, that your employees want to be excellent, and your customers demand excellence. And excellence is not only in concept and in our aspirations, but it's in our everyday actions. Are we excellent? Are we doing something that we're truly, truly proud of? In education, I see a lot of things that aren't excellent, and some of them in the worlds that we here play in. And when I really looked at it from as 2U CEO, but actually in my Princeton Review days and elsewhere, I look at things like this. This is an online site. It purports to be a search engine. So when you say I'm searching for a nursing school in Google, lead gen sites pop up all over the place. And what you don't realize as a student is, of course, that all of the listings are paid ads. And nowhere on the page does it talk about that they're paid ads. They're just listings. And it's as if some guy walked in a tweed jacket to your school, and he sat down in the counselor's office, and you went in to ask him where you should go to school, and he said, well, I smoked his pipe and looked at your stuff and said, I think you should go to DeVry. And only later did you realize he's actually just not a counselor, he's just a paid representative of DeVry. You would feel bad. That wouldn't be excellent. We did a survey of users of those sites, of lead gen sites, and said, did you realize that what you were looking at, I mean, we asked a bunch of questions, but the money shot was, did you realize what you were looking at was a paid ad, these listings were paid listings? And the answer was virtually no one understood that they were paid ads. Now, even in Google, not everybody realizes that the things that say ad are ads, right? So it's not like, the bar is at 100%. There's a reasonable man kind of aspect to it, but it should be 80+% who get it and not 5%. And so I've sort of looked at that, and by the way, well, we'll talk about it, but I've been thinking a lot in terms of the industry and in terms of taking this and professionalizing it within education at the notion of B Corps. And I don't know if you guys all know that whole world of benefit corporations. It's a growing trend. I think there are about 14 or 15 states that now, it might be 20 now, that recognize it. It's not a tax election. It says, I'm going to be a benefits corporation. I have a dual bottom line, and therefore the things I do aren't necessarily in the fiduciary duty of making the company worth the most, raising stockholder value. It might be in terms of our mission. And in order to qualify as a benefits corporation, I'm going to prove on an ongoing basis, so I'm going to have an extraordinary level of transparency into what I do and hold myself accountable not just for our financial goals, but for our social goals. And companies that you would expect are B Corp members, or some of the initial B Corp members, but there are thousands of companies now, and it's a growing trend, and you're going to be seeing more and more of it. And the question is, I mean, most of the B Corp stuff is aimed at sustainability and for education and for banking and so forth. It might not be the right paradigm, but I think it's coming. And the notion of an E Corp in education is about this sort of transparency. And we were mocking up what a page might look like. But imagine if a college could tell you before you enrolled, hey, we're looking at you, and you're a first-time college student, and you're the first in your family to attend college, you're 12 years out of high school, here's your GPA. Like, we understand who we're talking to here. And for kids like you, this school that you're about to look at, or you're about to apply to, 16% of the kids graduate within 6 years, versus the best alternatives for students like you, the numbers are more like 60%. And these numbers are somewhat made up. They're not entirely made up. The students from this school, like you, end up with a student debt average of $40,000 versus the best alternatives of $30,000. Have an average increase in income. So you're going here, if you're going here to raise your income, here's the increase you could expect versus your alternatives. And then one of the things that's going on in college now in terms of authentic outcomes, the most interesting work is being done by the Gallup organization. And they're doing it first with Purdue and ASU, and they're taking it globally. And the question is, let's forget test scores. Do our graduates thrive? Over not just the next year, but over their life. How do they feel about work? Are they happy? Certainly income is part of it, but are they engaged with their work and do they like it? How do they feel about their community in terms of their engagement? And are they just happy, healthy people? And these are all measurable things. Things like suicide rates, or alcoholism, obesity. There are ways of measuring well-being that are both qualitative and quantitative. And what we're really trying to get at in the Gallup numbers is, what is the value add of a university? And I think you're going to be seeing more of that too. But let's imagine that in our best of all worlds, we could look at this school and its graduates versus the graduates of other schools. And again, all of this has to be for students like you. If I tell a parent of a, let's say, incoming high school kid, if I say, look, the school that you're sending your kid to is a B- school, done, and I've computed that, with incredible precision and accuracy and reliability based on all test scores and so forth, that parent's eyes will glaze over. People lay down in front of the bulldozers when you're trying to close the worst school in the country. If I tell a parent, oh, kids like your son, when they go to this school, this percent of them go to college, and that percent of them end up going to prison. And when they go to this school, It's a much higher percent to go to college and a much lower percent to go to prison. Now people are paying attention. When you talk about real outcomes for students like yours, you start developing the kind of thinking that marketplaces should have, that people aren't, kind of confused by abstraction. They're actually avid consumers. And then finally, one of the questions that I think parents should know and kids should know is, how does this school spend its money? Like, here's the tuition, and here's where it's going. This much is instruction, this much is recruiting, this much is overhead, this much is profit, versus the other schools that they're looking at. And when you start having that kind of radical transparency is when I think we start transforming education into a clean, smart marketplace that promotes excellence. Now, the nonprofits are no better than the for-profits in this, and I'm not making a case of nonprofit versus for-profit here. This is the University of California system, and 20 years ago, there were over 2 professors for every administrator. And now there is 1.1 administrators for every professor, like just steady trends. And that's totally the reverse of what you see in real business, which is we're all getting more efficient with all these electronic tools and with all this data. Colleges are somehow getting wildly less efficient. And it is that the load of compliance, that all of the things they're trying to do for various cohorts of students, they're just loading with people. They're just throwing bodies at it. And that's really expensive. If you look at the cost of education over the past 30 years, the tuition has grown dramatically. Some of that is smoke and mirrors, right? Airlines discovered 30 years ago that price segmentation, I can charge you one price for the seat and I can charge you a different price, and they advertise their lowest price. Colleges discovered the same thing. Everybody's paying a different amount. Most colleges, their net tuition is about half of their stated tuition, most nonprofit colleges, except they advertise the most expensive seat, which is because they're colleges and they don't get it. But there is some real increase in cost. And this is where it is. It's not in instruction, it's not in faculty, it's in administration. The changes you're going to see as universities start understanding compliance and start understanding the sort of systems you have to be excellent, I think are going to be striking in terms of lowering the cost of education, because that's where the money is. In terms of passion, just a couple words that Alex asked me to say. Everybody knows Maslow's hierarchy, and the thinking in terms of business is that first you've got to make enough money and have a clean, safe workplace, and then you work your way up to issues that involve mission. And there are a growing number of people who believe that just isn't true. That it's not a pyramid. It's a pie chart, just like the food one. That once you finish the basic stuff, that people have to be well paid or reasonably paid, the mission of the company becomes actually a critical determinant in somebody's happiness with their job and in somebody's ability to really work hard. And again, I think compliance comes down to mission. Are we doing what we are here to do, and are we doing it well? Everybody wants to work for Tesla. Everybody wants to work for Apple. Everybody wants to work for companies that are excellent. This is my own companies, first Noodle and then one of my older companies, and then the Gallup numbers. And Gallup does a survey in companies of employee satisfaction. We do it every 6 months. We've done it forever. We're going to keep doing it. And what I'm tracking all the time, as important as anything on that list, is the mission or purpose of my company makes me feel my job is important. I'm running, it comes and goes. I'm running at about 58% right now. This is strongly agree. It's from strongly disagree all the way up to strongly agree. And the question is, what percent of your employees feel strongly agree? And the Gallup best companies, 50th percentile and then 75th percentile, sets benchmarks for how you know you're doing your job. And like everything you guys do, this is highly measurable stuff. And making people understand why you're here and what we're doing, and driving them to excellence, I think has benefits in terms of employee longevity and the quality of the experience of being there. Finally, I want to finish with, and then I love questions, and I should have told you to break in with questions and comments. But I want to talk about something Tony Hsieh talks about, which I love and I think is relevant. He, Zappos hires a ton of people who are customer service, and that's what they're known for. And when they hire new customer service people, they have this long process to bring them on board. And one of the questions that they ask them is, do you feel lucky? Are you a lucky kind of guy? Is it, from this scale, you just somehow things always work out great, and on this one, it's like you're under a dark cloud, and you're always kind of like working your way through things. And of course, everybody would rather have lucky people than unlucky people in their company. That's an easy one. But later on, he asks him a different question. He puts him in a room and gives him a section of a newspaper and says, I just want to see how detail-oriented you are. Can you just count how many photos there are in this section of the newspaper? Right? Straightforward job. And they walk out of the room. The guy's going through the newspaper and just counting. And on like page 7 of the section, it's there's a headline somewhere on the page, and it says, you can stop counting. There are 47 photos in this section. And some people see it and close it and answer 47 and move on. And a lot of people don't see it. And there's a huge correlation between people who are lucky and people who see that headline and finish early. What we're doing is making companies and making schools and making banks luckier. And with that, I'd love to just talk.
Hey, John. Jay Weintraub. Very nice to meet you. I only say that because I just tried to add you on LinkedIn, and I figure that way when you see the request, you'll be like, rings a bell, maybe. But so let's just say, not well thought out, fairly lengthy ramble that will hopefully have a question. And it's about sort of the lead, sort of generators. And I guess in the distinction between, and I'm hoping you can somehow talk about where 2U has taken some amazing for-profit brands and essentially helped them create new revenue lines, or non-for-profit, but created sort of,
Yep.
And then in the lead gen world, if you will, the role that they played for 2U, and then I guess more broadly, the thoughts on, is it possible, because at least initially, lead gen was this great, sort of, we work on performance, it's a good, like, we take risk, you take risk, but clearly, right, it's gotten out of whack from what you've said, so is it possible to get back into alignment? So I guess it's a two-part question about the role that you've seen them play at 2U and the ability for them to get a better reputation again, if at all.
That's a great question. At 2U, we're a major customer of the better lead gen shops, millions and millions of dollars a year and or a month. And overall, I believe in performance-based marketing, and I believe in it for education as well as for banking and other industries. It has gotten out of whack, largely because people, in exactly the way Alex you spoke about, haven't been paying enough attention to these are kids and high-risk adults who, when they go back to school, are as likely as not to drop out, right? So you really want to do well by these guys. And when I talk to various folks running lead gen companies, and I say, look, why can't this page really clearly say, oh, these are ads? Right? This site is, schools that we think are terrific that are paying us to reach you. And all of them say, look, this is just the level of competition. If I did that, my leads would cost more than anybody else's. The only solution is for government to step in, or somebody to step in, call them out, and say, we all have to behave. This is a race to the bottom right now, and the only way to fix it is either intra-industry or from government action, we just raise the level of the whole industry. I think it is very hard to be a class act right now in educational lead gen. Because in the end, we're all pretty concerned about our acquisition costs, and the less expensive guy ends up getting, a good business.
Scott Norwalk, Centerfield Media. I have a follow-up question to that, and then another question. So, wouldn't you, as the school, have to put the foot down and say, I'm willing to pay more, right? And hire people like Performline and say, I'm going to make sure that every page I'm on says sponsored, says ads, clearly discloses, and then I'll pay you more for it and kick out everybody else and maybe raise your allowable per enrollment, take the initiative that way and get all the schools involved and remove the bad lead generators?
So I left to you, again, a couple years ago now, and the Noodle Companies, we announced 2 months ago actually a new entrant into the OPM space. OPMs are online program managers, to use one, Embanet and others. Ours is Noodle Partners, and the theory behind it is $6 billion of ed tech spending later, you don't need someone to come in and take 2/3 of your tuition revenue over the next decade to have a great online program, right? We can help you craft something, software as a service, but a thin layer, pulling together the best marketers, the best lead gen guys, the best ed tech, sculpting it as a complete solution, but actually you'll get a series of bills every month from a bunch of players as opposed to just giving us a big rev share. And I'm talking to a couple dozen universities right now about kind of large-scale programs. We'll launch 4 of them in the spring of 2016, and then we'll scale up from there. And we will actually have Performline in every program we do. I couldn't agree more.
Okay. So you actually perfect segue into my second question. So my second question was, in the space that you use in where they're teaming with colleges and universities and bringing them online, kind of tech and education.
That's the OPM space.
Exactly. In that OPM space, how much room is there for fast followers? And now you're telling us that you are, your own fast follower, coming in. So, how big will it get? How many players will be available? Will it be 1 or 2 winners or many winners?
I designed 2U as almost a thought experiment, is can great universities go online and build programs that are every bit as good as their campus-based programs? And I think we did that and made the case, because back 8 years ago, that was really, there were a lot of skepticism on that issue. Look, well, no. The thought experiment now is, can we do that? Can we build solid online programs and help universities have the cost of tuition, right? And I think when you really look at what is expensive about universities, it's really interesting and utterly fixable. And again, you don't fix it by having everybody do something well. You fix it by having a couple schools do it well and then beat the crap out of everybody else. And they either follow or they die, right? That's how innovation works. And one kind of large trend in higher ed that you guys probably know as well as I do, but it bears mentioning. Back in the day, actually, still for the most part true in undergrad, universities spend about 2% of revenue on marketing, on recruiting, not on the admission side, but on the recruiting side. So community colleges, it's like $100 is their acquisition cost, and the small elite nonprofit liberal arts schools, it might be $2,500, right? So sort of in there. And the reason that they didn't spend more is you only had so many spots on campus, right? You have a physical limitation. If you spend a whole bunch of extra money marketing, you might drive more apps, but you're not driving more revenue. There's no revenue against that cost, right? You might raise your US News rankings a little bit because you're more selective, but that's about it. And there are better ways to do that, cheaper ways to do that. Once you go online, you have infinite capacity. And you move from a norm-based mindset, which is who are the best X thousand kids of my applicants and I'll accept them, to a criteria-based mindset. You start thinking, well, these are the kind of students we serve and we do a good job with. Let's get, if we can find 100 million of them, that's great too. Right? So once you do that, you start moving towards what's the marginal cost of one additional student. And the answer is sub $10,000. Right? The cost of teaching one additional student with great faculty in small classes is about that. So here's your tuition, here's $10,000. Everything in between, if you were utterly mercenary, the answer is, spend as much as you need to spend up to that dollar in marketing. So for-profit colleges spend 15 to 20% of revenue on marketing and recruiting. The OPMs spend 15 to 20% on marketing. This is a $600 billion industry that's probably about to spend an additional $100 billion a year on marketing. Gradually. It's not going to all happen tomorrow, over the next couple years. And so the issues we're dealing with in terms of driving down cost involve scale and involve smart, transparent recruiting practices.
We're in New York City, and I guess, so I'm sure since, you spend time here, you're familiar with General Assembly and sort of the new wave of, non-credited but for-profits. And, I guess so it's really great, right? You can be $50, $100 million business pretty easily, but it's hard to get to the size of Phoenix. So I guess the question is, how back to sort of the incumbent brands that have been there, is there a way for them to fix themselves, or is this really a reflection of that certain industries, it just shouldn't be considered growth industries, and that it's sort of unfair to make something like a Phoenix into a growth business where it's naturally going to be, sort of cyclical? So I don't know if there's enough of a question in there, but I guess it was somewhere between the blend of how do the sort of incumbents of the schools, how does their name get better if possible, and this notion that is part of the problem because they've just been so focused on we have to grow that it sort of created this race to the bottom.
I'll give an equally rambling response.
Thank you. People want to hear that one, not my question. Thank you.
No, it's a great question. Two things. First of all, the Department of Labor says that millennials are going to have 27 or 26 jobs in their lifetime and, 5 careers or something. That this is going to be a pretty mobile generation, and increasingly after the ones behind them. The notion of lifetime learning has always been something we, kind of waved our hand at. But I think things like General Assembly, the boot camps, and so forth are growing evidence that this is real, that 3 to 6 month spot programs for people who want to change careers or supercharge their career at different moments is going to be an increasingly important thing, both face-to-face and online. So I look at that marketplace of just-in-time learning as a huge opportunity, and the players in it are just sort of getting going. I think the universities could play in that space. They're kind of looking over at it. They all had for-profit units, effectively, the continuing ed programs at a lot of universities that have tried to figure out how to play in this, haven't successfully yet, but they have the vehicle, they have the concept of non-degree programs, and I think they could become significant players in it. There are banks starting up that are focused on student loans for non-accredited programs and non-degree programs along these lines. And I think you're going to see an ecosystem pop up around these guys that is that's important, that's of scale. In terms of higher ed, then, undergraduate is more important than ever, and we're not graduating a tremendous percentage of the population from four-year colleges right now. There's plenty of growth left in it, and not just for growth's sake, and not just for the sake of imports. Higher ed is our 5th largest service export. But as we do a better job, everybody talks about, wouldn't it be terrific if we had more plumbers? And the answer is, not that many more plumbers, right? Like all of us, our sinks work. And there are not an infinite number of jobs for people without a college degree that pay, let's say, 6 figures. I mean, it's just myth. So we really, if we want to have social mobility, if we want to continue to lead economically, I think the need for four-year education, and the need for four-year education, a college president said it really well to me. I'm here because you're going to be in the Olympics for in 4 years, and I've got to train you for it. But I don't know what sport, right? Because your job is going to change, your career is going to change, the world's going to change. So you got to be strong, you got to be fast, you got to be agile. I'm here to give you life skills in that. And I think the need for that is going to grow, not decline. Professional master's programs, I think, are really in trouble. Over the next 5 years, I think the great majority of professional master's programs will be online. And I think overall, you'll start seeing commoditization there, and you'll start seeing increasing competition from just-in-time learning. When I want to become a teacher, what's the alternative to spending a year out of the workforce and $50,000 of tuition? When I want to become a coder, what's the alternative to a master's program and $50,000 and, again, a year or two out of the workforce? And I think as there are great alternatives that end up in jobs, and all of those just-in-time learning folks, a significant percent of what they spend is on getting you a job, is on finishing the loop. I think professional master's programs are going to decline.